Hey guys, welcome back. In this lesson, we are going to talk about the resistance that comes with change, whether that's internal or external. And we're also going to just touch on the grief that we sometimes feel when we are transforming and we are changing our life for the better. Because it's something that I feel isn't really spoken about, and it's something that is super important. We can always take steps to make changes, we can always start to move forwards, but what happens when we actually start to feel sadness and we start to long for those old strategies that we used, when we look back on our old life and start to miss parts of it, even if we can see and understand that what we're moving to is what we want and it's the goal that we are longing for, that we're working towards. Sometimes this grief that comes with that. So let's talk about resistance first and foremost. Now, resistance will show up in many different ways. Again, it is far easier to look at the external resistance. When you start to make changes, perhaps you decide that you want to change jobs or you want to move somewhere, you're always going to have people that question that, whether that's people that are close to you, whether that's colleagues. You'll get the question, well, what are you going to do? Well, how are you going to afford it? Well, what if it doesn't work? These are all external questions that end up getting projected onto us. And what you need to understand is that just because they have the fear, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. Ultimately, they are projecting their own fear and their own insecurities onto you. So this is where everything starts to come together and you can start using those tips and tricks we spoke about in the earlier module just to check in with yourself and just start to see if when someone says, well, what if it doesn't work? Is that me taking on their view? Or is that something that I genuinely believe? And either is fine because we obviously have our internal resistance as well. And I spoke about it briefly in the last lesson, but the way that our mind works, it's like a computer system. And ultimately, the more we do something, the more it gets trained to understand that's how we do it. So when we inevitably decide that we want to make changes and we want to take a new direction, our own mind is going to work against us because it doesn't want things to change. It wants the easy route. You know that when you try and do something, you'll always try and make it easy for yourself. No one wants to choose the hard path. And that's because we're designed that way. We are designed for survival. So the brain prefers the certainty because then it's predictable, it can protect you, and it can understand the outcome. And obviously we now live in a world where we aren't necessarily worried about food and foraging and hunting and all of these fears, but now our fears come up as not having enough money or what other people might think. What if it doesn't work? These insecurities, which the brain will take on as genuine threats and genuine anxieties. So when you do feel afraid of starting again and you feel afraid of what if it doesn't work, that is absolutely valid and it is perfectly normal and you should honor that feeling. But what we try to do is we try to acknowledge that and say, okay, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that thought. It's something that I've thought about, but this is my goal. This is what I'm working towards. And I don't necessarily know how it's going to work because we can't know. We simply cannot know what is going to happen every single day as we move throughout our life. So it's no different with this, is when you make a commitment to achieving a goal, no matter how small or large that is, we just want to focus on that first step. So we've taken some time to identify your how and what steps that you'll be taking as you progress beyond this course. But now it's a case of understanding that when you are greeted with these unwelcomed questions of resistance, like what if it doesn't work or how are you going to do it, you'll be able to sit there, whether that's an internal question or an external question, you'll be able to say, well, actually, how I'm going to do it, this is my first step, and I'm going to take that step, and once you've taken that one, the second one will reveal itself, and so on and so forth. If you focus on the 9th step or even the 18th step, you just find yourself spiraling into this questioning, and your brain will inevitably want to keep you safe, and it will stop you from taking that step forward. And ultimately, resistance says stay where you are. It says don't change. It says don't do anything risky. And if we want to take steps forwards towards our goals, then we're not going to be able to control all of the variables. So we have to get comfortable with overcoming that resistance by choosing smaller goals rather than huge life changes and blowing up our whole life in order to make a shift. If we just take 1 or 2 steps and we can start to walk forwards, start to take more information and more understanding about how we're going to achieve our overall goal. Ultimately, if you choose to do nothing, then you stay where you are. If you take 1 step forward, you can always return back. So if it doesn't work out, you just come back. But when you step back, you now have information that you didn't have. So then when you take another step, whether that's a day later, the same day, it could be a month later, you take the step with new information, you take the step with new knowledge, and this is how you can start to compound wholesale changes in and around your life. It doesn't have to be huge life shifts. It can just be gathering information whilst you start to understand how you're going to work towards your goal. And it's really difficult because change feels really exciting at first. When we start taking steps, we start making changes, when we even plan or say we're going to do things, it fills us with excitement. It fills us with these good energy feelings that we're about to make changes and things are going to change for the better. And that's great when we can harness that and we can start using it to take those steps. But we will find resistance. We will start to find levels of uncertainty and we will wonder if it's going to work. So that's where it becomes really challenging because we meet our own internal resistance. And when we start to transform and we start to make changes, it impacts everything. It's not just us. It impacts our relationships. It impacts how we show up in the world. It impacts people that know us and people that have a version of us in their mind. So as soon as we start making changes and as soon as we start talking about the things that we're doing, even if it is something really small, it ultimately challenges other people. And then again, it comes back to that projection of insecurity. If you start taking positive steps in your life, then what you are doing is you are proving to your family, to your friends, to those people around you that you are in control and anyone can take a step forwards. So if they feel insecure in their life and they don't know what to do, they don't know how to make a change, or they were always told that you just have to stay where you are, it's not possible to change, then if they see you having any level of change, whether that's a ridiculous amount of success, whether that's even just starting, that will impact them. So that comes back to them having their first thought, that emotional response to you making changes. And that can be really difficult to deal with. And this is where the grief comes in to transformation, because we can't always take our old lives with us. As we start to make changes and we start to take steps to a more positive, more fulfilled future, we have to make wholesale changes to ourselves. So we have to change our mindset. We have to change how we view things and how we show up, not only for ourselves, but how we show up in the world. So ultimately, that's going to impact our friendships. It's going to impact our circles. It's going to impact where we want to put our energy into things. So as a result, you may experience friendship breakdowns, relationship breakdowns. You may stop enjoying the things that you once enjoyed. And that can be really difficult to manage. And it can make us feel like this isn't working. It can make us feel like this is a bad idea. But if we revert back to our North Star and all of the reasons why you signed up for this course, all of the reasons why you want to change and move towards your goals rather than staying in the same place, you can start to understand that it's not a bad thing. You just can't always take your old life with you. Of course, as you move into your new life and you move into a person that is self-aware and checks in with themselves and is able to handle more pressure and is able to reset at any point and find direction and start taking steps, taking ownership, all of these amazing qualities and traits, you're going to find yourself in different rooms. You're going to find yourself attracted to new people. You're going to get on with different people. And as I say, there's a lot of grief that comes with that. But grief doesn't mean that it's not working. And we can actually start to challenge this through journaling or any other sort of mindfulness practice, whether that's whilst you're meditating, or you could even have the conversation with a friend or a trusted person. And ultimately, it's a case of just asking yourself, what am I actually feeling? What am I actually grieving? What is it that I'm finding hard in this moment? And that way we can start to understand if there's a pattern between when we feel this grief, when we feel this resistance, which in turn will help us to process that and move forwards. This is why it's so important to understand what our goals are. It's important to understand why we're doing this, because then when we do find this resistance, whether that's internal, external, when we feel this grief, we can come back to, oh yeah, that's exactly why I'm doing it. This is exactly what I want. It's what I signed up for. Rather than taking these steps forward, we've not managed to identify any steps. We've just rushed forward because we wanted to make a change. And then once we hit this kind of roadblock of, oh, I don't feel so good, or I missed that, or is this actually working? You panic because you haven't prepared, you haven't got a reason, you haven't come up with your goals, and you haven't come up with any strategies on how to deal with this. So that's why it's so important, and that's why the course has been written in this way, to be able to take you all the way through. It's giving you the ability to catch yourself when you're in this moment and actually deal with it, and deal with it with confidence. Whether that takes you a minute, that might take you a day, it might take you a few days. Sometimes we do just need to pause and just allow ourselves to reset and integrate the new information. If you're feeling a wave of grief and it's affecting your motivation, then I would say it's important to stop and go and do something else rather than pushing on and pushing forward, because it will knock you down later. Before we move on to the next lesson, the last thing I want to say on this is the most frustrating part of making any sort of changes. And as we start to move forwards with our goals and we start to get a level of success and we start to believe in these things actually changing for ourselves, you have to start to learn to really enjoy the process, because the goalposts will always move and the goals will continue to change. So what might be your goal now, in 6 months' time, you might have achieved it, or you might be well on your way to achieving it. And there can become a lot of resistance and a lot of grief with that, because in 6 months' time, you might have achieved your goal and you might be looking to the next thing. But what comes with that is new identity, new challenges, new fears. These goalposts always move. So it creates new challenges. Again, brings us back to the importance of having a full, well-rounded approach to walking towards our goals, rather than just running out ahead and using urgency and really trying to force ourselves to change. We need to have a strategy in place, which is why this course was designed. It's why I've given you all of the tools, so then I can feel confident and you can feel confident that as new challenges come up, new identities, new new methods of resistance, and we start to feel that grief, we can actually deal with it. So this lesson, we've spoken about resistance, whether that's internal or external. We've spoken about the grief that can show up as we start to change and transform. And we've spoken about how important it is to have a well-rounded approach so we can start to deal with any setbacks as they come. And in the next lesson, we are going to be talking about how to deal with setbacks. Sounds good? I'll see you on the next one.